It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! It is Feedback Friday, and I am still getting over from being nauseated by Twitch on Thursday. Oh man, I'm gonna warn anybody, if you go and watch the stream, I am not gonna put it up yet before I give this warning, so hopefully you put this, I'm gonna clearly mark it on the video too. There are full screen white flashes on the second Darkness video. I will put huge seizure warnings on them. It is in the original game, and it made me nauseous and disoriented. It did weird things to the inside of my brain. So, warning, I will put warnings all over the video. I will not release it live until this has gone live so people know, because this is something very important to me. And, whew, man, I'm glad they don't do that in games anymore. That was a rough part to get through. Like, ugh. So, and that, and the fact that Iran accidentally shot down a passenger plane that killed, well, 175 people, that matters, but also 68 Canadians. It's just, I'm reliving some really sad memories and some frustration over my connection to Air India Flight 182. It's just, it's not a PTSD trigger or anything like that. It's just very sad memories. And so I'm kind of low energy. Like, I'm kind of like, just, I'm sad about that, because it is sad. I mean, a couple of world leaders start doing a dick swinging exercise with missiles and civilians get killed. It's, you know, if Trump and Iran had not did what they did, those people would still be alive. Accident or not, that's a tragedy. And it's like literal tragedy in that it was preventable. And those sorts of things just make me sad. So I'm declaring that up front. So if I'm lower energy than usual, that's why. Also, my Monday video, the thing I did on Terry Gilliam, got demonetized. So that's frustrating too, because I think things like this are important to talk about, but YouTube discourages this sort of dialogue by demonetizing the content. So come support me on Patreon. Patreon.com, Leanna K. There we go. Help support me on Patreon. Patreon.com, Leanna K. A little always look on the bright side of life from Monty Python. There we go. That wasn't so good, but like I said, I'm sad. But I'm very glad I did the why do you hate Star Wars exercise. There were over 200 comments, so obviously I had to curate. There's a lot of really good stuff. A lot of people were like, I'm not really mad, I just didn't like it. I not liking it, that doesn't, there are going to be people who don't like everything. I mean, like I said, I have not loved a single Avengers movie. The closest I got was Captain America Civil War, which was kind of an Avengers movie, but not really. It wasn't an Avengers brand. I just don't like them. There's too many characters. I always like bounce off them and I end up tired and bored by the end. Now, I know I'm the minority. So I am not, fascinated by why people don't like the new Star Wars movies, because you're allowed to not like stuff. You're allowed to like stuff. I am fascinated by why people get so angry at it. And some of the answers were interesting. One was connected to the idea that no, actually, people feel like they're not allowed to not like a Star Wars movie. If you don't like a Star Wars movie, they perceive you are a bad person. So there's like pent up frustration associated with the dislike. So they come on like a ton of bricks, which, all right, I can kind of see that people are being defensive. And so they come off stronger than they would if they were just allowed to say, I didn't like it. But, that's when we also get into the idea if somebody just leaves it to, I didn't like it, well, you can't really argue with that. When people start fighting the points of it, that's when I start going, okay. And Oron Darklord, of course, like if there was an MVP for comments on this channel, it would be Oron Darklord. Dude constantly brings it. Like if I ever start up like a gaming channel, I will get this dude if he's willing to do like a written column, because he is very, very insightful on a point of view that I don't access well. So I really appreciate his participation because he helps me understand this particular side. He's very good at explaining this point of view. And what he said is, nerds define our hierarchy by intelligence. That's the first thing I went, wait, nerds have a hierarchy? Aren't we all kind of at the bottom of the hierarchy? This is when, you know, my seasoning, my age shows, because I'm like, right, no, we're not in that time where nerds were just inhabiting the bottom of the social hierarchy. Now it's cooler to be a nerd. And so there is a nerd hierarchy. That's the first part. I'm like, brr, I have to factor that into my understanding, because without that, if you don't acknowledge a hierarchy and you ignore it, you get bad results in terms of persuasion, because hierarchies are real. So nerds define our hierarchy by intelligence. We all want to feel like the smartest person in the room. And part of that peacocking, interesting choice of words, is nitpicking, all right? Finding all the little fringe logic flaws and writing problems in media and pointing out that we notice them. This is another place where I sort of go disconnect, because as somebody who creates content, content creators often don't see things as right or wrong answers. Now, content consumers do, because most people, if they've taken creative writing courses or they've read some pedantic blog post about things, they don't realize that rules of writing, rules of creation are not like laws of thermodynamics, okay? You understand the rule in order to break it when needed. I mean, one of the most famous, I remember learning this in university English literature and having my mind blown. One of the most famous lines in science fiction is actually a grammatical error. To boldly go. To boldly go is a split infinitive. Technically, it is incorrect. You are not supposed to split infinitives. It is supposed to be boldly to go or to go boldly. But let's face it, neither of them sound as lyric. You don't get the rhythm, the lift on to go boldly as to boldly go. Just aesthetically, we have the ability to split infinitives in English. We have the ability to start a sentence with but or and, right? These are breaking rules, but you do it in part to mimic the way people talk, not the way people write, but also sometimes it just friggin' sounds better. We would not have the entire wonderful, brilliant, creative genre of hip hop if, you know, the grammar sergeants were in charge. Part of the beauty of poetry, you know, not just straight up correct language, but artistry in language, is the ability to break these rules, to make up words sometimes, to engage with onomatopoeia, you know, deliberate malapropisms, crap, what do you call it when you combine two words? Shit, blanking, see, forgot word, not as good. But like, you know, this amalgamate words, like they do with every celebrity couple, like Bennifer and J-Rod and all that stuff, you know, those are all artistry of language instead of straight up construction. And I know I'm taking a lot of time on Oren's comment, but that's why I'm like, okay, disconnect number 1 for me, disconnect number 2 for me. I'm not engaging with this the same way a particular group does. They want a series of right or wrong answers instead of going, nah, man, but it's flow. You know, that wasn't what they were feeling right now. And if you talk to a lot of artists, it's just, that wasn't what I was feeling then. And you're like, all right, that's fair. There's times I'm not feeling it either. Like, yeah, that's a totally valid choice. I chose not to take it because 20 other people did that. I don't need to, right? So we got hierarchy defined by intelligence with nerds. This results in peacocking to establish hierarchy. This results in nitpicking and pointing out that they noticed flaws, which from another less hierarchical, rigid perspective are not errors. They're just different creative choices. So there we have so far, but it keeps going on. That's what I'm saying. This is a brilliant comment. This is also why nerds are so heavily into theory crafting what's going to happen in media, predicting twists and calling how stories will end as a kind of battle of wits, both with each other and with the writers. And that's another thing that I actually find takes away my enjoyment of everything but video games. Because when I'm in a video game, I can play with things. Now, usually video games, because they have to be played, they're a little better at that stuff. But I gave up guessing what was going to happen on Game of Thrones. It was so stupid to me from the beginning. And I know I'm in the minority of that. But I guess maybe because I was aware of the books, I knew what was coming. And I'm like, I'm not interested in getting invested in this story. But once they ran out of books, then I wanted to see where they were going with it. Because all of a sudden that was new. But I mean, occasionally a show comes along that I can predict. Silicon Valley, Mr. Robot. You notice they're both about computers. Now, part of that is engineers and computer programmers and even hackers. They're highly predictable types of people because they are system, or maybe they're predictable for me because I'm a systemized thinker. But usually, I mean, HBO's Watchmen was a good one as well that way. I thought, and I know some people disagree. I know some people thought the entire Ozymandias storyline was utterly stupid on Watchmen. I thought it was friggin' brilliant. So again, you know, there's a level of subjectivity there, but I don't like to guess. Because what ends up happening is, again, I write my own stories, I create my own content. I'll be like, well, I like my story better than this story, and so I'm just going to stay with my story. That was the problem with comic books, is I got so invested in comic book characters that I started telling my own Superman stories and my own Wonder Woman stories and my own, like the big one for me was the Spectre. Oh my God, I got so headcanon with the Spectre and Plastic Man and stuff like that. And then I was reading the comics and going, you know what? The stories I tell myself are more interesting and satisfying to me than the stories I'm reading in the comics. And so I'm like, why am I reading and buying these comics? And then the Super Sons happened and it was adorable. But I drifted away from comics for that reason. When you're at the point that you are creating, I think you should just create. You're not a consumer anymore. You're a creator, and you do have to scratch that itch. Because if you scratch that itch, it's like, okay, I'm creating my own thing, so I can sit back and let another creator take me on their vision of how they were going to do it. But let's move on. So there's already like 3 disconnects with this type of thinking that I didn't understand. So this was a good exercise, okay? So all this stuff about the theory crafting, the nitpicking, the hierarchy, which often leads to a sense of outrage and betrayal if a studio pulls something out of left field, ignores previous foreshadowing, excessively misleads in advertising, or quote unquote subverts expectations. See the Game of Thrones ending. Oh, it was a Game of Thrones thing. Not a direct Rian Johnson thing. Okay. As a kind of unfair advantage, failing to fool us legitimately and instead resorting to I'm the author, I can say anything I want happen no matter how random. And this is where the hierarchy comes into play. Because if there's no hierarchy, if everything's just equal, if there's no status on the line, then who cares, right? Ha ha, funny joke, fooled me. That's my life with cats. Whenever a cat does sort of an asshole thing and falls off the bed or something like that, I always say, ha ha, funny joke. Or, you know, if they shit in my laundry basket or something like that, it's funny joke, you know, that's life with cats. And so what he says basically in summary, basically we want writing in general to operate in the spirit of a fair play mystery. And yeah, you're going to be very unsatisfied with space opera if you're treating it like a fair play mystery. Meaning not Murder, She Wrote, meaning, you know, something, because, you know, Murder, She Wrote. And the funny thing is that Arthur Conan Doyle himself said that he didn't find the Sherlock Holmes mysteries brilliant deduction. He said, I was deliberately leaving out a piece of information from the audience so they couldn't solve it. But people liked being brought along for the ride anyway. And there are things, there are very good shows. I personally have shows like Penny Dreadful was the one I really got into this with. They put clues in the opening titles that if you watched the imagery connected to an actor's name, it foreshadowed what was going to happen to the character. And I'm like, all right, that's very cool. Now, with movies, normally you can do a fair play mystery. With television, it's more difficult because, you do your 3-season arc or you do your 1-season arc. And it's like, oh shit, we got another season. What are we going to do? Right? Or you get your 4-season arc and get a 5th one and you don't want to go, no, only 4 seasons because, you're employing 300 people, 60 to 300 people. And so it's like, okay, we'll do another 5th season, And so that level of planning is not there. And so people pull things up and they change things and mistakes get made because it's serialized. And unfortunately, the Star Wars movies, these last 3, were done kind of like television process. In that instead of like the Marvel films where they had this board that sat down and figured out where everything was going to go, it was a handoff, right? And it was supposed to be 3 different directors. It ended up being 2 different directors. But left hand did not know what the right hand was doing because they had to develop the film before they got fan reaction or anything to the last one. And there was no communication. I'm on record as saying I think that was a mistake. And with George Lucas, he knew he wanted, and actually he didn't. The original script was I killed your father, and he thought it would be more interesting. I am your father. And there's kind of plot holes all through it. But they're minor to me. It's like, I don't care. It's fun. I mean, with the prequels, I don't love the prequels, but they knew where they were going, right? With the sequels, it was tabula rasa, right? But it was too tabula rasa. I'll leave the rest of Oron's comment because I want to get to other people's. Basically, I'll read it really quickly because it's still good. When it's pointed out that we missed flaws and plot holes in media we saw when we were younger and didn't have the sophistication to think that way, or simply media we really like and willfully ignore the problems with, we generally go into a defensive posture because pointing out we missed something questions our intelligence and thus our status in the hierarchy. And other people pointed this out too, that the sequels made them worry that the previous movies actually weren't as good as they thought they were. Simple tribalism plays into it as well. Competitive fandom, my console, why full shit, Hogwarts House, favorite Star Wars trilogy, whatever is better than yours. The most healthy people keep these rivalries in the spirit of friendly competition. But when these elements of nerd culture are ignored or willfully removed from context to cast us as bad people, misogynists for daring to think these things, and moreover when our right to establish and maintain such norms and customs in our culture that we built is taken away and we are told, no, Rey is more important for her value as a feminist symbol. Therefore, you must prioritize that good over your own culture and capitulate to our insistence that she be accepted unquestioningly. See, I didn't know that was part of it. I do not find Rey is something designed to sell toys. I don't go any deeper than that. And other people pointed out that the corporatism, the commercialism of Star Wars is something that bothers them now. But what he said is, being forced to say, no, this is a good character, we feel invaded and colonized, made second-class citizens in our own space, and we won't take that. So any arguments or nitpicks that we were already going on become magnified to nuclear levels. And this is the core. Like, I think Oron seized on this. And I want to end on this, so I'm going to just quickly talk about other reasons people gave for the big, like, Oron's comment, I think, contextualizes the enormity of the response. But other people said, it's an element of performance. It's like booing your sports team, not because you hate it, but because you really love it, don't want them to tank. You want them to do well. So you boo your favorite sports team when it tanks. All right. as Aram pointed out, people have some issues with the corporate process with Disney. The idea of being so hyped, there being so much hype around those movies and the movies not meeting the overhyped expectations. Yeah, that's a big thing. That happened to me with the second X-Men movie. I went in and I expected it just to be so freaking stoked. I mean, like, I loved Lady Deathstrike in the comics. And of course, that Lady Deathstrike was not the Lady Deathstrike from the comics. She was mute. And I was so depressed. That feeling of this was mine, now it's not mine. I get that in that way. Because of the way they did that, I didn't get openly angry about it, but I did get a little pissy. So I kind of get that. Somebody brought up an interesting point that kind of dovetails into the whole Golden Globes thing that I talked about on Twitter but didn't talk about here. The idea that it's sort of an acceptable thing to throw hate at actors or actresses because they somehow deserve it. Ricky Gervais went in and just gave it to all of them. And because I'm a content creator, because I did work in television, because I was that actress that everybody just hated, I came at it from a different perspective. I never liked it. I never like it when award shows focus on, well, you're not that good. Because it's subverting the entire, not subverting, it's destroying the whole point of an award show. You feel really crappy in this business a lot. People don't realize how behind the scenes, like a lot of the things you guys see in public, that is gloss. I saw people get torn apart in performance reviews, like just savaged. They were not allowed to bring in a lawyer or a manager. They had to go in there alone. This is how abusive the workplace practices were. And they were just told everything they were doing wrong so that they wouldn't ask for more money, right? And then they had to go do a 3-hour shift on air and smile. That's what being in these roles is actually like. There's far too much abuse. And so for me, an award show, yes, it's frivolous. Yes, it's stupid, but it's an opportunity for people who work a job that's way harder than it should be. And you got to remember, these people, like, they haven't eaten and they're dehydrated so they can look a certain way in a fucking dress, and they're hopped up on a whole bunch of pills so that they're jangly as fuck. And then somebody comes on and blasts them. That's not an idea of a good time. There's a reason that some entertainers do not go to those things. It is not a fun time. So I just thought it was so... Because Ricky Gervais got up there and acted like he wasn't one of them, right? He is an A-list entertainer. And it just felt like a circular firing squad to me. And it felt abusive to me. It was abuse couched in comedy, but it was shooting fish in a barrel. Everybody had to sit there and pretend to laugh because that's the game. And that's the perspective I took from it. Other people are like, yeah, he gave it to them. Fuck those people. And I think there's an element of that when it's like a sort of class warfare. That here are these pretty shiny people with pretty shiny, $10,000 teeth, $30,000 plastic surgery, putting it lightly. I mean, Kelly Marie Tran, obviously not there, but $4,000 hair extensions, mink eyelashes, just the sheer cost that you're looking at. It does great. But the thing is, you got to realize people wouldn't do that because they want to. They just want to play pretend. They enjoy it. They want to play characters. All that stuff is part of the job. They are the billboard for a whole bunch of products. So I think there's a disconnect there. There's sort of a collective dehumanization that the whole way actresses are presented now makes people feel bad because better than you. And then people don't understand the other side to it, which is those actresses end up actually feeling like they're not good enough all the time because they're constantly being told what their flaws are. They're a lot more like regular people than people believe. It's a tough gig. It's the whole audition process is a constant stream of rejection, and it's not constructive. It's brutal. So I think that's part of it. Somebody said having to learn something new characters, new world, new lore elements. That upset some people. One thing that I'm like, okay, this I can totally understand people being upset and not getting over is the destruction of extended universe canon. That makes sense to me, that they just never got over the fact that they wiped out all the stuff and put it and kept nothing. Like, you couldn't keep a few things, just throw the fans a couple bones. Like, that would have been nice. Yeah, that I get, because that actually feels like something being that is something being taken away, not based on identity, but actually being based on the information of the universe. People had this idea of the world, and then they had to forget it all. And like, if they hadn't named him Ben, because for people who don't know, there was a Ben Skywalker and a Jason Solo in the extended universe books and comic books and all this stuff, and now there's a Ben Solo, and it's fucking confusing for me. And like, there's no Mara Jade and a lot of these other things. The fake out killing of spoiler, but you know what I mean, from Rise of Skywalker, is an homage to something that actually happened in the books. But it didn't happen the way it did in the books. So all of that, interesting stuff. Interesting, right? There are a lot of legitimate reasons why people just had an overwhelming frustration on this whole thing that have nothing to do with being bad people, amplified by being told it's bad people, so people go into defensive crouch. Now, I want to go back, like I said I would. This idea of we are being made to feel invaded and colonized, made second-class citizens in our own space, and we won't take that. And this is something I think that is misunderstood, because there's a theory out there, and it works in a lot of places. I think it gets subverted with the just add nerd element. And it's a theory called cultural cognition theory. Also, identity protective cognition is another thing it's called. And that people, researchers discovered that certain groups of people took risks. I'm not racializing this. Certain groups of people had fundamentally different risk perceptions in given scenarios, and why. And they found that a lot of the time, white males feared all manner of risk less than women and minorities. It was called the white male effect until they understood that that was a losing title and started calling it culture and identity protective cognition. And the idea that individuals selectively credit and dismiss asserted dangers in a manner supportive of their preferred form of social organization. And this explains, I mean, it's interesting because listen to the very wordy academic definition. It uses a lot of the same words that Oron used, right? This dynamic, it is hypothesized, drives the white male effect, which reflects the risk skepticism that hierarchical and individualistic white males display when activities integral to their cultural identities are challenged as harmful. And so basically, there are certain comfort zones in, how do I put this in layman's terms? You know that uncomfortable feeling, guys, when you're in a female-dominated space and you're hesitant to speak because people are going to jump all over you? That's how a lot of women feel at work because of certain male-dominated industries. And it doesn't mean people are actually going to jump all over you. There's just this fear because it happened too many times in the past. Like, you be very careful what rap lyrics you rap along to, white people. You mouth the N-word. You don't say the N-word. But that is subverting the perceived dominant paradigm, right? Now, nerds had it in a different way. That's why I prefer identity protective cognition and not the white male effect. Because it happens with everything. It happens when you go into a female-dominated space and some guy starts to go, well, what about me? There's a strong reaction. You try to change hip-hop culture as an outsider instead of an insider. You have a strong reaction. And the mistake I think a lot of people make is because I got to be real careful with this because I want to make my point. I don't want to just get dismissed. Yes, nerd spaces, especially gaming spaces in North America, tend to be white and male. It's not that players are white and male. The people who go to the gathering places. Now, I will say that PAX was much less white and male than E3 is, and that's because of gatekeeping that has nothing to do with gamers. But what you tend to see is white and male. But that may be a factor that informs the hierarchy, but that is not the underlying structure of the hierarchy. The underlying structure of the hierarchy is nerd. And I am no more valid a nerd than a white dude is. Because I am strong with the nerd. I mean, when I was playing Twitch yesterday, I was getting really frustrated, apologized for sucking. Because that was violating the hierarchy. I don't like to be that bad, but the game was making me fucking ill. And it turned out it was actually something that had nothing to do with me. So let's swap out white male and let's put in nerd. For whatever reason, nerd culture operates, as Oron says, on certain rules. Now, these may have come about for various reasons, but let's face it, we're not talking about traditional masculinity paradigms, because traditional masculinity paradigms define worth by your attractiveness to beautiful women, how much money you have, how athletic you are. None of that. Maybe the money thing, but not so much in nerd circles. Nerd circles come down to one thing, two things, but mostly they're extensions of each other. How smart you are and how skilled your intelligence makes you. You are everything but intelligence is a dump stat in nerd hierarchy, okay? Star Wars was Star Wars was a crossover thing. So nerds experienced it in a different way than the general public did. And this, I think, therein lies the tension here. One person pointed out that the original trilogy was made for teenagers. The prequels were made for children. And that was a shift. I don't know, the Ewoks point, Empire was not made for children. I'll give them that. But yes, the prequels were very much, which is why I can't figure out some of the choices they made, very much kids' movies. Now it's shifted again. And so there's some of that. But also, people, because it's science fiction, it's seen as ours. And then people come in and go, this isn't yours anymore. We're taking it. And the external perspective is, who cares? You're white males. You're privileged. You need to share. The insider perspective is, nuh-uh, we're nerds. We had that loss of status. We built up our own hierarchy apart from the traditional social hierarchy because we failed hard there. You have that. Like, that's yours. Nerds say that traditional social hierarchy, that's yours. Now, nerdy women, let's face it, nerdy women don't do so great on the traditional social hierarchy. I say this as somebody who, my boobs were, I won't say I was a C cup by the time I was like 14. And I still had people going, Leanna, if you were a girl, would you like me? Evidence of girl. Like, what the fuck? These aren't man boobs, guys. But intellect degendered me. And maybe that's the reason I'm not attached to my gender. But it could be I wasn't attached to my gender to begin with, so I didn't signify in the ways that they'd respond to. Either way, I did not do very well in the girl hierarchy. So you've got this group of female nerds. And it's the same as nerd guys, except nerd women have no hierarchy within, let's say, normie girl hierarchy. But they have no status within the nerd hierarchy when you first walk in, because no one has status in the nerd hierarchy when you first walk in. And herein lies the critical disconnect. And herein lies why I think Ray drove people crazy, even though objectively there's nothing. Ray, the nerd hierarchy believes should be a personification of a female nerd, which means that sort of egalitarian nerddom where everybody starts at the bottom and works up, because that's how nerd hierarchy works. That is not how the hierarchy of girl world works. And I think this is the disconnect. Guys are more expected. Guys are given more social permission, even among normie standards, to suck at something and get good. Girls are expected to walk into any space fully formed. There is not the same experiences of making mistakes in public, which is why women in media either have to be completely hideous and deformed or stunning, beautiful, perfect. It's toxic. It's gross. It's not healthy, but it is very real. Like, people didn't like me. Other women didn't like me because I made them feel, still do. I made them feel insecure because I was willing to just fuck up in public. It's still a really big issue that women are not given the same sort of moral and social license to make mistakes. I mean, holy shit. Look at the whole royal family, right? Like, you don't see very many comments about Prince William's hair. But if Kate has a hair out of place, she was expected to look flawless after being in labor. She just had a baby and she was expected to have her hair done and her makeup done. And that's where I'm like, that poor woman. That is not natural. That is artificial. And I think you'll notice I'm not wearing very much makeup lately. And it's weird because more and more I'm getting comments that some of you prefer this look, which is so weird to me because that's obviously not the TV standard, right? You pile it on, right? So I've kind of listened to that and like, shit, it's less work. I'll go with that. You prefer this? Awesome. But that is what I love about gaming. And that is what I love about nerdity, for lack of a better term. And this is the thing that the mainstream doesn't get about nerds. They believe that nerdy guys expect women to look perfect all the time. And I have not found that so. Douchebag normies? Yeah, absolutely. But nerd guys? No, you guys are way more understanding. You guys understand that that doesn't just happen. And guys are happy knowing a woman can look like that and chooses to look like that sometimes. Guys are like, all right, when it happens. But you guys are actually way more accepting of women not looking that way all the time. Why? Because there's another more important value you assign to women, which is skill. Is she good at games? Does she know what she's talking about? And I know you guys don't give a shit how pretty or hot a woman is if she doesn't know fuck all about games. You're happy to teach them, but it's not the same, right? It's not the same relationship. And so I can show up here with next to no makeup and talk about this shit, and you guys treat me with total respect. But then I'll have a corset, like, God, a PVC spider web bodysuit, right? You guys also treated me with respect. You knew it was a character. You allow women to be whole people. And that is something that is not understood in mainstream, in douchebag mainstream, in normies. And so the nitpicking that gets thrown at everybody, the no, you start at the bottom. Everybody got to be a Drake song. Started at the bottom, what we hear, right? Started from the bottom, but we hear. You got to start as a level 1, kill some rats, kill some goblins, and level up, right? I think the big issue with Rey is she showed up a level 18 cleric. I just pulled that class. She showed up high level. That violates the hierarchy. And I really think that if it was a too perfect guy, there would be the same sense of, but there wouldn't be the same. I want to make sure I put this, and I know I'm going long, but I want to make sure I put this. Male nerds are used to being beaten down by male normies. And so while they hate traditionally perfect guys just as badly, they say less because there's a fear. But that doesn't mean they like them. I think that with Rey, people wanted to like her. People wanted to take that character and put her on their shoulders and champion her and cheer her. And then she violated that hierarchy that Oren was talking about. That makes sense to me. That is identity protective cognition that has nothing to do with race, a little bit to do with gender, because I know that a lot of guys in this community are desperate for more female characters that they can champion. They want those. But it can't just be any woman, because that feels gross. Like, this is the thing people don't understand about nerds. You don't want a woman who's just eye candy. You know, and I'm not telling you what to think. I'm telling you what I've heard. You actually value skills and value integrity in women as well as men. And so when you're thrown something that seems shallow and told to like it, you get pissed off. And that's actually an anti-sexist attitude that's being accused of being a sexist attitude. Now I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let you guys tell me how well I did there in terms of translation. This is my theory. It fits with identity protective cognition. Thanks to Stuart Hayashi for Hayashi. Yeah, I'm sorry, Stuart, if I said your name wrong, but he dropped that term and reminded me of it. How did I do? How does that sound to you? Does this make sense? Because if it makes sense, we've actually figured out why everything went cray-cray. And that's kind of amazing. And that's what I love about this community. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Have a great weekend. Really interested in your feedback. Even if I'm like 20% right, 40% right, 60% right, we're getting there, right? Like, this is important understanding. Okay, I know this video was long, but it took a while. Help support this channel. If you like this sort of content, become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Have a great weekend.